Hi, I'm Michelle Newberry, and I'm a special education teacher for the Burlington Community School District. At the time of my study, I was a 5th to 9th grade Level 3 special education BD-LD teacher. We are located in a self-contained classroom. I'm also a Morningside grad student seeking a master's in special education. The title of my study is called Improving Academic Achievement Through Cooperative Learning. The problem. Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, or ADHD, is among the most frequent diagnoses in students aged 4 to 17. Over the years, countless strategies and interventions have been put in place for students with ADHD, but many are still not making the same academic progress as their peers. Children with ADHD often have trouble with their academic and social interactions. This topic interests me because I have students with ADHD and I want to help them become more successful. Lit review. ADHD has adverse effects on students' academic performance. ADHD symptoms can include inattention and or hyperactivity and impulsivity. Strategies and interventions that are effective for one student may not be as effective for another. ADHD often interferes with the student's readiness for learning, thus negatively impacting academic performance. Teachers need to identify the unique needs of every student, as well as their strengths and weaknesses. Cooperative learning. Cooperative learning is what I chose to use during my intervention phase. Cooperative learning is when students are working together on the same learning goal in small groups or in pairs. Since I only had 4 students for my study, I used pairs. Working cooperatively is a skill that students can take away from the classroom and use in the real world. The best way for cooperative learning to be effective is to use innovative teaching that will engage students while they are working with their peers. There are several cooperative learning research-based strategies. The one that I chose for my study is called Think, Pair, Share. I'm going to explain a little bit about what Think, Pair, Share is. It's been around since 1981. It requires students to think through questions using 3 steps. It's suitable for all grade levels and class sizes. The first step is called Think. Students think independently about the question they are given and form their own ideas. Then they move on to the pair stage, where they're placed in pairs to discuss their thoughts. During this step, they are explaining their thinking and considering their partner's thinking. The last step is called Share. This is where they get together as a larger group and share their ideas. Gap in research. Many of the studies I found did not include any special education students, specifically ADHD. More research has been done on the effects of cooperative learning in elementary students or with post-secondary students. I found little research on the effects of cooperative learning in reading and math scores. Purpose statement. The purpose of the single subject study was to determine whether the academic performance of students with ADHD can be improved by working in cooperative learning groups. Hypothesis. It was hypothesized that students would have higher math and reading scores throughout the intervention phases than throughout the baseline phases. Variables. The instructional condition that made up the independent variable was cooperative learning versus independent learning. The dependent variable were the students' math proficiency measured using the CBM math and students' reading proficiency measured using the CBM reading. This was an AB research design. It means I alternated the baseline and intervention twice. Each was 3 weeks, totaling 12 weeks. The participants, I had 4 participants. They were all aged 12 to 13 and in the 6th and 7th grade. They were all 4 boys. They all four had free and reduced lunch. There was 2 African Americans and 2 Caucasians, and all were diagnosed with ADHD. Materials. Each student had a Dell Chromebook with Chrome operating system. They used these to take their CBM and CBM math and CBM reading, which is part of the FAST assessment. And the science curriculum we used was Pearson Interactive. Reliability and validity. CBM reading 5th grade retest reliability had a median score of 0.94. The concurrent validity for the CBM reading 5th grade test had a coefficient of 0.96. CBM math 5th grade reliability coefficients were from 0.80 to 0.92 for basic facts, and validity coefficients were from 0.40 to 0.80. Procedure. A single subject experimental design using the alternating baseline to intervention phase was implemented to examine the impact of cooperative learning on math and reading scores. This researcher again used Think, Pair, Share. Academic achievement was measured through the CBM reading scores and CBM math scores. I collect 6 data points for each phase, 3 math and 3 reading. The intervention was done during science. Well, baseline and intervention was done during science 4 times a week for 50 minutes. On Fridays is when the tests were administered, so they took their CBM math and CBM reading on Fridays. Methods. Continued. Data analysis. The data will be collected and analyzed using visual data inspection, or I should say the data was collected. It was hypothesized that students' math scores would have an increasing trend during the cooperative learning phases and a 0 or decreasing trend during the independent learning phases. It was also hypothesized that students' reading scores would show an increasing trend during cooperative learning phases and a 0 or decreasing trend during the independent learning phases. Results. It was predicted that students' scores would have 0, minimal, or declining data trend during the baseline phase and an increasing data trend during the intervention phase. With all 4 participants, there were little to no increase in baseline data and an increasing data trend of the intervention data for CBM reading. With all 4 participants, there was no increase in baseline data and an increasing data trend for the intervention data for CBM math. So this proves that the hypothesis is true. Again, here are the results for the CBM reading. You can see that each graph is for each student. It shows the 12 weeks, the 4 phases, and you see here baseline either declines or stays the same, and the interventions increase for all 4 students. And then here's the results for the CBM math. The same thing, each student has their own graph. It has all 12 weeks of the study. It has the 4 phases. There's little to no increase in baseline or declined, and then there was increase in the intervention phases. So again, this proves the hypothesis. Connections to past research. There was a noticeable increase on the mean scores for the participants on the CBM math test as well as the CBM reading test. A study that was conducted by Gupta and Ahua had similar results. The group that was taught with cooperative learning had greater increase in their reading scores than the direct instruction group when comparing their pre-test and post-test. Students were more engaged during the intervention phase because it was new and they were working with their peers. This was also the result of a study done by Williamson and Null, who stated that the best way for cooperative learning to be effective is to use inventive teaching that will engage students while they're working with their peers. And lastly, during the intervention phase, students worked in cooperative groups using Think, Pair, Share. They were able to share their ideas with their peers through questioning and were able to share with other groups. This explains what Kodora was saying when they suggested students are more likely to want to share when they are presenting with a partner or a group. Connections to theory. The study also supported Fikowski's sociocultural theory and ZBD, or zone of proximal development. When students work cooperatively, they tend to hold on to the information longer because groups tend to learn through discussion, which is then retained in their long-term memory. The zone of proximal development is described as the student's scope of learning with assistance from the teacher or more experienced student. My participants were able to learn from each other, retain the information longer, and get another participant's perspective during Think, Pair, Share. Implications. Cooperative learning can be successful in other subjects. When students are in small groups, they can learn from their peers and get time with their teacher as needed. Students participate more and are more engaged when they can take charge of their learning. The findings suggest that cooperative learning may have a positive impact on students with ADHD's academic success. Limitations. There was a small sample size. Again, I only had 4 students in my classroom that were 6th and 7th graders that could do CBM reading and CBM math. The students were not randomly selected. Again, they were in my classroom. There was a small grade range. I only had 6th and 7th graders. The study was only 12 weeks, so that's a short time. And of course, I teach behavior-focused classrooms, so sometimes classroom behaviors got in the way, as well as frequent interruptions from snow days. There were different levels below grade level among participants. For example, 2 of the participants were only a year below grade level in math and reading, and I had 1 student that was significantly lower than his peers in reading. Only 1 cooperative learning strategy was used. Again, I only used Think, Pair, Share. There was other research-based strategies I could have used. Recommendations for future research: have a bigger sample size, randomly select the participants, maybe get students from different classrooms, use more age groups and grade levels, have the study run longer than 12 weeks, select participants that are around the same skill level, not a big of gap in their independent levels and grade levels, and use more than 1 cooperative learning strategy. And here are my references. Thank you for your time.